All right, great. So thank you for joining today. My name is Brian Castelli, and I'm going to be joined by some of my colleagues. The names of the folks who are full-time employees on the Metro team are there on the first slide that you were showing. And we'll go ahead and follow this agenda today. We're going to start out by just giving you an overview of what MetroAE is. This is going to be very brief. MetroAE is very full-featured, and there's a lot of parts to it. We're not going to touch on everything. This is not a how-to presentation, although we will be glad to give those kinds of presentations at other times. The main focus that we have today, though, is we want to introduce you to some of the new features that are available in MetroAE version 3.3 that was released a week before last. And there are things there that will be helpful to all of you. Then we're going to take a moment to speak about some of the existing features that you may not have heard about. There are things in our feedback from the field, people are sometimes surprised by all the things that we do support, and so we want to make sure that we give that to you, give an overview of that to you. And of course, we're going to take just a brief glimpse into the future to let you know what's on the horizon for us, what we're working on right now, and of course Q&A at any time. So let's get started with the overview. And so MetroAE is a platform designed to help you automate the installation and migration, or sometimes we call it upgrade, of the Nuage network software stack. It's primarily focused on the VSP components like VSD, VSC, Elasticsearch. We also support the VNS components like the utility host and the NSGV. As part of the platform that gets delivered is we're trying to make this as simple as possible. We provide with it scripts for doing automatic setup. We run Metro. We do prerequisite checks to increase the chance of a successful execution. By using Ansible and Python under the covers, we provide you with a consistent execution environment, and that means is it's going to behave the same way every time that you run it. And one of the side benefits to that is, hey, if something didn't work because it wasn't configured correctly, you can tear it down and just redo it. That's one of the things. I like the fact that we have a redo or a do-over type of an environment. One of the things that we pledge to do over time is that we want to support this tool in the long term. So we update it and test it as Nuage releases come out. So for example, the 3.3 release was delayed because it turned out that 6.01 was released, and that broke a few things. And we felt strongly that we would hold the 3.3 release until we fixed the things that needed to be updated to support 6.01. So when 3.3 went out, we could say that it also supports the new 6.01 Nuage release. And of course, it's all built on Ansible and Python. So some of the things that we support is the VSP, so VSD, VSC, Elasticsearch, and vSyn for the vCenter environment. For cloud services, VCS, we also support VRS deployment. And I want to be clear, though, that this VRS deployment is something that does not integrate with OpenStack. We don't do the VRS integration with OpenStack, nor do we do the ML2 driver on OpenStack and all that stuff. That is the purvey of the integration team, and we haven't gone to that. We don't do that part of the work. But if you want to set up a few VRSs or a number of VRSs in an environment for testing purposes or proof of concept, we will support that. And then on the VNS, we support the utils VM, and we support the NSGV with bootstrapping. So we can configure the NSGV to do a zero-factor bootstrap, or we can one of the other type of bootstraps. And something new in version 3.3 is some contributed code from the VNS Portal team. And so you can use Nuage Metro to deploy the VNS portal as well into your environment. And in terms of the kind of environments we target, the hypervisors and so on that we deploy, KVM, vCenter, OpenStack, and AWS. And again, I want to clarify with the OpenStack deployment, that is not integration with OpenStack. This is using OpenStack as a generic hypervisor. So we do have a few customers who say they want to bring VSD up on OpenStack and then do other things with their environment. So we support that kind of thing. And the AWS piece, that is converting. What we've done is we've just manually converted some of the images to AMIs. We will deploy the VSD and the Elasticsearch onto the AWS. But for VSC, we can't do that. We can't convert to AMI. So when we say we can put VSC on AWS, it's specifically going for a bare metal instance on AWS. So we have test code that creates a VPC on AWS and then pushes VSD, VSC, Elasticsearch, and so on out into that environment. And if and when you want to use MetroAE, there are two ways of accessing it. One is via github.com, where you would repo. We have a repo out there. If you don't already have access, you probably will need to know that it's a private repo on github.com. So you'll have to request access so that we can add you as a collaborator. The other way that you can consume Metro is via Docker container. And what that does is it simplifies the prerequisites that are required. So for GitHub, you do the clone, and then you execute the Metro setup script. That setup script will ensure that you have the proper packages installed and all of that. But with the Docker container, all of that's handled inside the container, and your prerequisites are you have to have Docker running. So you can download the Docker container, spin it up, and access Metro that way. All right, so when we deliver MetroAE via any of those two methods I talked to, it comes complete with a set of docs or documentation that will give you instructions on how to set it up, how to customize it, how to run it. Also provide a number of examples that we generate that show you how to configure for particular environments, like how do you do this on KVM, how do you do this on vCenter, and so on. And then it also comes with the setup script so that you don't have to do all of the fine-grained prerequisite setup. We have a setup script that we deliver for setting up the container, which simplifies some of the work there. And then how do you provide us with input? Well, we support something called deployments, and we support one or more of these deployments. They're directories on disk that have the YAML files in them, and that is the user input method. We have also introduced with version 3.3 a MetroAE wizard, which will actually do the setup and creation of deployment for you. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more detail going forward. So a little more information about what is a deployment. It's basically a directory full of YAML files. And I did a tree view on my deployments directory on my laptop there on the right-hand side. You can see that I have a deployment folder named Data Center, another one called Default. That one comes with the software by default. I also have one called Small POC, and then a VCS VNS configuration. And you can see that each one has a particular set of files in there. The names indicate what they support. So for example, in the data center deployment at the top, you see that there's a common.yaml. Well, that's a set of parameters that are common across all different types of operations, whether it's an install or an upgrade or a health check. Credentials, that's where I put all of the information about logins and stuff. So we support the ability to have a hardened VSD, for example, where you disable root access, but you have another user that's been created. You would give the user credentials for that user in that file. Upgrade holds specific information about upgrades. VSCs, that is all the information you need for your VSC. VSDs, the information you need for your VSDs, and so on. So it's all in a YAML format, and the key to using the YAML format and sort of the power of using Ansible in the first place is that you specify what you want. You don't specify how it's done. So you tell us what you need, and then we take care of the how behind that. And as you see there on the right-hand side, there are multiple deployments, so you can have as many different deployments as you want and keep them separate in that way. And here's just an example of the type of data that we would collect inside of those YAML files. It's pretty simple. And what we're showing you here is there's a set of things in the common.yaml on the left. And those are parameters that you would provide to us that give us information about that we need to do the work for you. The one in the center, that's the complete specification for a VST cluster. This is the default minimum. We do support other features and things that you can customize on here that we'll talk about later. Things like CPU pinning, the number of CPUs, the number of the amount of RAM that you use for your VST, and all those kinds of things can be provided if you need to. And then on the right-hand side, that's the complete specification for a pair of VSCs. I could take these 3 files and use them to deploy 3 VSDs and 2 VSCs in my KVM environment. All right, so that's it for the overview, and we'd like to switch now to the new features. But before we do, I'm curious if anyone has any questions at this point. You'll need to unmute your connection and let us know. All right, let's go ahead and transition into the new features portion. For that, we'll have Stefan telling us about.
Hello everyone. So we'll go over the new feature list for MetroAE version 3.3. We have a lot of features in this new version, and these are some of the features that went in the 3.3.0 release. I'll speak about all of them in the upcoming slides. For a full list of features, you can go to the release page, and there you can find all the features that have been implemented and all the issues that have been fixed for this release as well. Let's get into the first feature. So we implemented support for installing the SDN Portal. All you have to do is fill in some information about the IP address and some other information for where to install this SDN Portal, and once it's installed, you can just hop on to the URL and you'll be able to see the SD-WAN portal. So all the work needed for installing that is done in this release. This is a sample configuration for installing the SD-WAN portal. So as you can see on the right side, that's the information that you need to give, and then portal1.company.com portal will be installed via Metro. Some of the other common credentials will go with it. We also support the install of active standby VSD cluster as well as the upgrade of active standby VSD cluster. What an active standby VSD cluster is: a cluster of 3 active VSDs and 3 standby VSDs. The active ones are the main ones that are doing the work, and the standby ones are in place so that if the active is not working, then it will switch to standby mode. So we now support the install as well as upgrade of active standby VST clusters. We also introduced the IPv6 support for installing components with IPv6 interfaces for control and management interface in the major VSP components such as VSD, VSC, and VSTATs. Now you can bring up these components with IPv6 addresses, and all you need to do is in the configuration deployments, enter IPv6 addresses, set up IPv6 params, and you'll be ready to go. This is a sample example of IPv6 configuration. You can see that the IP addresses specified here are in IPv6 format, and you just edit the YAML files and you're ready to go. This is also one of the major changes in MetroAE 3.3. Ansible version that we use now is 2.7. Previously in 3.2 we were using Ansible 2.4. Now this Ansible allows new set of features that we can use. The new container will already contain the Ansible 2.7. Those who are not using the container version will need to download the Ansible version of 2.7 and after that run your Metro on that. We now support the in-place VST upgrades. So this is like patch upgrades. So if you want to move from, let's say, 541 U1 to 541 U3, you can use Metro to do such an upgrade. And in this, a new VM will not have to be created. The existing VSD VM will be patched with the new software, and this saves a lot of time, as well as the process is automated in 3.3.0 version. So we also do a active standby VST cluster failover. So if you have a scenario where you need to convert your standby cluster to an active cluster, and likewise change the active cluster to your cluster, then we have a procedure in place that Nuage supports, and we have implemented this procedure in MetroAE, and all you need to do is run the VST failover script, and then you will see that the active cluster becomes the standby cluster and the other way around. And if you want to reverse this, just rerun that script again, and you will have the same active cluster back, which was your previous active cluster. Going to the next slide, we also support the same thing for VSTAT. So if you want to Elasticsearch, so if you want to change the primary Elasticsearch to become standby, and the standby to become primary, we support the Elasticsearch failover, and we also support the active standby cluster install as well. So if you want, just like VSD, if you want an active Elasticsearch cluster and a standby Elasticsearch cluster, that can be installed by Metro. And these are the commands that we have to do the failover procedure and the failback procedure for the Elasticsearch nodes. Go to the next. We also support VSP component upgrades on OpenStack. The VST, VSC, and Elasticsearch components can all be upgraded on the OpenStack installation that Brian was mentioning a few minutes ago. And the user needs to specify the target server type as OpenStack and add the changes to upgrade.yaml file. And once the user runs upgrade that specific component name or the entire upgrade everything, then the upgrade will take care of everything. So this is the list for what I talked in this feature list. If anyone has any questions at this point, then they can unmute and we can go into specifics.
Hi, this is Raghu here. So one question is whatever features that's being currently shown, right? Are these applicable for both greenfield and brownfield deployments, or are we looking at only greenfields here?
They are applicable for both greenfield as well as other deployments, so they can be used anywhere.
I mean, you don't have to use Metro to do the initial install to use Metro to do an upgrade, for example. So any existing deployment can be modified or upgraded using Metro.
Okay. So my question was more on assuming I have not used Metro initially, and then I need to do some upgrades, or if I have to do, say, active standby vStat cluster, right? So in a production node, I can still do that using the scripts, right?
Yes, absolutely. Even if you have previously installed using non-Metro, you will still be able to use Metro for upgrades and or installing any other components that haven't been installed yet.
For example, let's say you were in a situation where a customer needed to scale up and add a new VSC pair to their existing. You can use Metro to install just that new VSC pair if that's what you like. And those kinds of operations are supported.
And my second question is, are these scripts all standalone ones? Like assuming I just wanted to say have a couple of scripts which I wanted to run, right? So do we have to install it as an entire bundle, or we can kind of do it on a script-by-script basis? So you can kind of decouple everything and then run whatever I want to run, or do I have to download the entire package and then do it?
So the scripts that are the playbooks that we deliver with MetroAE are what we call hierarchical. So at the very top of the stack, you have install everything, right? And what it does is it calls lower level playbooks, which in turn call even lower level playbooks. And so you have the full power and flexibility of either saying, oh, go ahead and install everything, or you can execute the individual operations themselves. We support the full hierarchy, so you can do the specific operations one at a time. So for example, with BT, when they're doing an upgrade, they say, oh, we want to use Metro, but we want to do particular operations. We want to be really careful, and we want to check things in between, and we have our own scripts that we want to run in between the steps. And we say, that's great. You can just use our fine-grained playbook steps on the way, and that's what they do. So they've created their own process by which they execute the low-level scripts and then interleave with their own custom scripts.
Does it come along with the Nuage package, assuming I buy license for Nuage? So is Metro inbuilt along with it, or should I have to procure a separate license? Please pardon me, this is the first time I'm kind of attending this workshop, so.
Yeah, no apologies. We're happy to have you here. So it's a separate thing. I call it a stand-aside platform. So you either download it clone it from the repo, from the GitHub repo, or you can use our container. And it's not part of the standard distribution of the Nuage components.
It's not licensed either.
Right.
Yeah, so the customers wouldn't have access to this, right?
Yeah, customers do. It's on the public GitHub. It's just a private repo, and so we have, I think, 50 or 60 customers who are currently have access to the repo.
The customers have to fill up a form on our website to authorize the GitHub access and information. And once they do that, we add them to the GitHub repo and they get access.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
We're going to move on. Along with the other features in this 3.3 release, we are including a Metro Wizard. The wizard steps you through all of the required prerequisites to get MetroAE prepared to do a install or an upgrade. The MetroAE wizard runs in both container version and repository version of MetroAE, and it satisfies all of the prerequisites necessary to do your VSP install or upgrade.
I just muted you.
Sorry, still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So it satisfies all the prerequisites necessary to do a VSP install or upgrade using MetroAE. You'll see some screenshots on the bottom here. On the bottom right, this is the initial screen of the MetroAE wizard, and you can see some of the steps listed out. So it verifies that the installation is correct. It unzips your image files. It creates your first deployment and walks you through each of the common upgrade and the major core components. And then it also sets up SSH on your target server so that Metro is ready to go after you're complete. We've created a YouTube video, so that's available for everyone to watch to walk you through the process of running the wizard. And it's started by the command MetroAE wizard.
Okay. All right. So this section is for talking to you about the things that you might not have heard about. And we've mentioned them here, but I'm going to go ahead and repeat anyway. We do, in fact, ship MetroAE in a Docker container. That's great for environments where you don't want to need to have the prerequisites of the MetroAE satisfied, and we'll do that for you. The Docker container also has one other benefit, and that is that when it's running, there's a REST API that can be enabled, and that can assist in some environments where it can be a northbound API into overarching automation frameworks that your customers may have. So it's yet another way to get Metro integrated in with your customers. When you use the Docker container, part of the setup copies all of the docs and the deployment files and all that to the hard drive or the disk of the Docker host. And that allows you to have access to all the information that you need and be able to operate without having to get inside the container. It's a really convenient way of making all of that work. Some folks were not aware of the fact that MetroAE supports the ESXi hypervisors, and that includes the deployment of vSyn into a vCenter environment. So you can spin up a full VSD cluster, Elasticsearch cluster, geo-redundant, active standby clusters. All of that is also supported on the ESXi platform. I think I mentioned earlier our support for AWS. So we can put VSD, Elasticsearch, and so on via AMIs and VSC on bare metal. And we do that in our lab. We have an AWS environment testbed. For NSGV, we do the zero-factor bootstrap, which is really handy for things like lab and proof of concept deployments. And then something we added in the release previous to 3.3 that folks were not aware of is that we have custom core pinning, custom core counts, and custom amounts of RAM. So you can specify more RAM for your VSD depending on the requirements that you have. You can give more cores to VSD or so, and so on. So that's another piece of the support that we have. And then finally, we'll wrap up here with a glimpse into the future. So some of the work that is either complete and waiting for the next release, or we have in work, is a utility function that allows you to do VSD certificate renewal. That is a general purpose function that can be used at any time, but it's especially helpful during an upgrade. So one of the things that we do in the upgrade is we allow you to say, hey, see what condition the certificates are in, when they expire, and so on, and we allow you to do that renewal. Other customer requests that came in, they were in an environment where they said, hey, we want to use Metro, but we want to operate via SSH proxy. We want to operate from a system that doesn't have direct access to the hypervisors themselves in a KVM environment. So we went ahead and implemented support for operating via SSH proxy. Anybody who's used Metro for some time may have recognized the fact that we were not supporting VSC quite the same way as the other components. Metro has a stepwise process that we follow. We do pre-deploy, and in the pre-deploy step, it's responsible for making sure prerequisites are satisfied, VMs are spun up, and so on. Then we have a deploy step. So we do deploy to get things instantiated. We do deploy to actually configure them, and then post-deploy and health to verify that everything's sane and working the way that it's supposed to. In the VSC case, we were doing the config.cfg stuff in the pre-deploy, which meant a customer or someone who wanted to use a different pre-deploy method, like Terraforms, for example, couldn't use our VSC deploy step. So we're moving the configuration of the config.cfg file into the deploy step so that customers can use their own pre-deploy method and then use Metro to do the configuration of those instances that have been spun up. That's a use case that we've seen quite a bit, where people have a framework for bringing up VMs and so on, and they just want to use Metro to jump in and pick up at install the VSDs, for example. We're also delivering a new feature that we call custom hook execution. I referred earlier to the fact that when we were working with BT, they wanted to execute things in between our playbooks. At their request, we've implemented custom hooks, which means you can execute any arbitrary script part of the MetroAE execution. You configure the script to run, and then when that hook is encountered, if it's configured, we'll go ahead and automatically execute that script on behalf of the customer. This prevents the customer from having to write their own script and wrapping it around Metro, and then in fact just do the work. The other thing that we're working on right now, and it's kind of in a trial period, is we're talking about doing automated day zero VSD configuration. And that is, MetroAE up until now, it installs or it upgrades and everything's great, everything's ready to go, but then the user would have to step in and create their enterprise zone, subnet policies, and so on, in preparation for the arrival of that first virtual machine that gets instantiated. Well, we're looking at kind of piloting a program that would automate that on behalf of the customer. So that's it for our presentation for today. Thank you for joining. Before we go, though, we want to invite you to ask any questions that may be on your mind. You'll have to unmute so that we can hear you.
So the recording you're making here, are you going to make this available? How do we get a hold of it?
So after the meeting, I will respond back to the, do a reply all or back to the Nuage interest list. And that I will include there a link to the recording, a link to the PowerPoint presentation, and a link to the wizard video that was referred to. Maybe I'll include a link to our video playlist on YouTube. So that will give you access to that data.
Yeah, I need to ask one thing. So, in the document, is that we can use that tool for the standby and upgrade?
Okay, so I didn't get the first part of the question. You're asking about active standby upgrade.
Yeah, already we have installed the active and standby cluster, and now we need that. Okay. So,
Yes.
so with this help, we can upgrade then. Is there any standard procedure also you guys mentioned somewhere in that thing?
Yes, so in the Nuage Metro, either in the repo itself, the clone that you create, or in the documentation that comes along with the container, there is a description of how to do an upgrade. So the documentation is there. It's a step-by-step procedure to describe how to do that. So you have something that you've already installed. It will give you, what you need to do is just configure a deployment with the proper IP addresses and so on for that, for what you already have, and then execute the upgrade step.
Because we have done that activation by cluster by manual installation.
Yes, that's fine. We will support that even if you've done the initial install manually. Yes.
Okay. And there will be procedure as well in there.
Yes.
So we can rectify that. We are doing it way or not. Okay.
Well, Michael, one question here. So I'm part of the integration team, and currently we are doing a project for Vodafone in India. So as part of this Nuage VEPC project, right? So we have kind of written a lot of Ansible and Python scripts for specific use cases for Vodafone, whatever we have seen as part of integration team. Okay. So is there a mechanism, or is it possible for us to integrate our scripts to the Metro tool as some kind of an open community where people who have written some code in Python or Ansible who have tested this successfully with, say, a specific customer can kind of contribute to the Metro tool? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, so for example, we talked today about the SD-WAN portal support that we have. All of the code for the SD-WAN support was contributed to the Metro team by the SD-WAN team itself. So we have this sort of internal open source model that we operate by, and so we encourage folks to do contributions. We would encourage you prior to the contribution that you get in touch with us. Either send us mail, one of us mail directly, or send mail to devops@nuagenetworks.net. So that we can have an initial discussion, because what we have to talk about there is, if you contribute code, who's going to maintain that over time? You know, does my team have enough bandwidth to maintain that over time, or is that something we're going to have on the side? But anyway, so the short answer is yes, we take the contributions. The longer answer is we'll need to decide how we're going to support it going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question here. I've been using Metro for a while.
Hey,
and,
how are you?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, quite productive. Yeah, Gwyn is really good. Yeah, and he's always really helpful. He's really helpful always.
1 second.
Hold on, somebody's talking.
Fantastic. So it's good to have him on our side.
Where?
Yeah, and then.
All right,
Okay,
let's try it again.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, here's my question. So basically, now I know that you support like the Metro deployment of more than one VSC pair. So I have a full deployment running 4 VSCs. But my question is that when it's already supported for upgrade as well, because when I need to upgrade, I need to separate my deployment file into 2 different pair of VSCs, and that sometimes could be a little bit messy. That's question number one. And question number two, do we have support for the VSC deployment to have like a multiple context VSCs, like instead of having the control interface deploy on regular global routing table, to have like a different VPRNs to support multiple underlays?
Okay, so for the first part, unfortunately, it is a little messy when there's more than 2 VSCs, and the standard procedure that we recommend is that you have multiple deployments. That isn't terribly convenient, but it's certainly something that we'll take a look at how we might be able to make that simple. Make sure I'm going to take a note before we go any further. Okay, and then the second question was VPRNs, I think. Did you say?
So support for like multi-context VSCs that you can have like managing 2 underlays, one in one VPRN and another one on different VPRN.
Okay, so we currently don't have that support built in, but I could take that as a suggestion.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions, folks? Once again, thank you very much for joining. We're always available at devops@networks.net. That goes to every member of the team. We will be sending out mail after this meeting that contains links to information that you can use to either replay this or get your questions answered. Thank you very much.